right, good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody again. It's been a little bit. So tonight we're going to be talking about something that Tim actually started on last week, or it may have actually been the week before. And unfortunately, it's not really a lot of cheerful stuff. We're going to be talking about more about the Beatitude. And so talking about rules, talking about law can be a little bit, I wouldn't say boring, but maybe not quite as enthusiastic as some other subjects. So obviously laws and rules are there for a specific purpose. And so Jesus has some specific rules that he wants us to follow, and rules that he gave specifically to the Jewish people in his Sermon on the Mount. So we're going to continue talking about these. Last week, I believe, Tim talked about murder. Is that correct? Did y'all talk anything about that? Okay. And can anyone give a refresher on what Tim talked about? All right, any main points?
It's bad.
It is bad, yes. Yes. So basically, murder, we should not murder, but Jesus told us something.
He takes it further.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what does Jesus talk about that we should not do that would maybe potentially lead to murder or something else? Yes, we should not have any hate. We should not have any anger. And so Jesus is going to tell us that we need to make sure that we don't have any kind of anger or anything that could lead to a sin, especially a sin as bad as murder or anything like that. So that's a little brief overview of what Tim talked about last week. But I want to start out asking a question. And that is, what is your reaction typically when someone corrects you? Depends on who it is. Okay. So, yeah. So there are certain ways that people can correct. Now, let's say that someone comes up to you and you're doing something that you've done for years. You think that you know exactly how to do it. And someone comes up and just says, you kind of been doing that the wrong way. So how do you think you would react? Yes. So you would probably get defensive, thinking, again, I've done this for a long time. I know how to do this. I know what this means. But that's kind of what Jesus did. Jesus came over to the Jewish people, and they had the law of Moses that they had been going by. And a lot of people were sort of twisting what the law says. Do we see that today? Of course. There are people that will twist rules and laws to make it the way that they want it to be. And so Jesus says, hold on there. This is the way it should be done. You've been doing it this way. That's not the right way. So yes, it can be tough when someone corrects you. But how do we normally take constructive criticism? Would you say that you personally take constructive criticism well? Or do you think that's something that we could all work on? Mm-hmm. I know for sure that I could. If someone tells me that I've been doing something wrong, even if they're doing it in a nice manner, you do get defensive a little bit. So that's something that I personally could really work on. Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. So with Jesus, when he's talking to the Jewish people, he's saying this is the rule, this is the way that it should be done. It's not necessarily his opinion, it's just that's the way that it needs to be done.
When you're in a position of authority and you're the one that's in charge of making decisions, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like the way you decided to do it. And I've been in that position most of my adult life as a teacher and a coach. And when I have people criticizing me, I don't like it, but I try And sometimes I come to the conclusion they're idiots. I come to the conclusion that maybe they were right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking on it is definitely a good piece of advice, not just reacting. But yeah, we are definitely called to respond in the Christian manner, like you mentioned. And it does. It does. You can't just blow up on somebody. And actually, a story that I want to go along with this is back whenever I was in either middle school or early into high school. And, I told you before, I'm a huge fan of baseball, so you've learned about that. Another thing I'm a big fan of that I love to do is drawing. I've drawn pretty much all my life. And I like doing a lot of like sketches. And I try to do a lot of realistic type drawings, more like portrait drawings. And we had this assignment in my art class. And the assignment was to do a self-portrait. So I thought, well, great. I've done this several times. Like I've done portrait drawings for years. So I go into it, I'm excited. And this is something that I didn't just work on it for like one class period. I worked on this thing for days, if not weeks. I mean, I was trying to get as detailed as possible. And as I kept going and going, I felt better and better. I was super excited to show this to my teacher. I'm like, I just crushed this. I did an awesome job. And not to brag, but I felt really confident about it. So when the day came for me to turn in the picture, I walk up to the teacher. I'm like, check this out. This looks awesome, doesn't it? And she looks at it, and she didn't really look the way that I figured she would. She kept looking at it. She kind of made this look right here. And she said, huh. I was like, oh, okay. What does that mean? So she keeps looking at it, and she says, well, it's okay. It's not the best. And you've heard before, if looks could kill. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I spent a lot of time on this. I thought I did really well. And she said, well, you could probably improve doing this and this and this. And thankfully, I didn't blow up or anything. I feel like I probably handled it somewhat okay. But when I got back home, I was pretty furious because, again, I'd worked on it for a long time. This is something that I felt pretty confident about. And then the teacher's going to tell me, well, you could improve on that. So, again, there's certain ways to handle situations. And being told something like that, it can be tough. Again, whenever you've been used to something for so long.
Did you find that she was right?
I did. I did. Now that I'm looking back on it, and I can compare some of my drawings today to back then, I'm like, I definitely see what she saw. So she was right, but at the time, I did not think she was right. Yes, ma'am. But that kind of leads us into the next subject after murder is adultery that Jesus talks about. And in verse 27 of chapter 5 of Matthew, Jesus starts out, and he starts out a lot of these the same way. He says, you have heard, or it has been said. And in this case, he says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. So, when you hear the word adultery, how would you define that? Immoral. Yes. So, being in a relationship with someone, specifically being married to somebody, and being unfaithful, I would say, being immoral. So, back then, adultery was actually a really, really, really serious offense as probably as serious as murder. And of course, it is a serious matter. But back then, the man and the wife, at times, either side, whichever one committed adultery, could be actually stoned to death. Again, it was a very serious subject, and it could have a serious punishment. And if we look in Leviticus 10 through 12,
I think it's 20.
was it?
It's 20.
Was it? Okay, yeah, that's right. Leviticus 20. Yes. It says, if a man commits adultery with another man's wife, even with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress must be put to death. So it's a very, very serious matter. And back then, a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier, similar to today, were very technical with the law. So they would do as much as they had to do to technically say that they were covered by the law, that they obeyed the law, but they still wanted to do what they wanted to do. And so in this case, as the law said, according to the Jewish people, it forbid a married man to have sex with another married man's wife, have any kind of relationship with a brother's wife. So it says in the Bible that a Jewish man, married man, shall not take his brother's wife. And back then, again, people would do as much as they could to say that they obeyed the law. So, for instance, a Jewish man who is married might say, well, this single woman over here, she's not married, so if I had a relationship with her, it'd be okay, technically, because the law says that I can't take my brother's wife. But maybe I could have a little relationship with maybe this prostitute or this single woman over here. And so obviously there are some issues with that kind of thinking. So Jesus comes along and he says, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman, who even looks at a woman lustfully, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So what do you think of that? That's a little bit more specific than what the law had said before.
Jesus is continuing to, I don't know, you guys would say upgrade the teaching of God, or the law of God, in that it's not just a matter of physical, but now spiritual. It's all the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Just like previous discussion we've had about hating your brother. Murder is no longer physically putting your hands around the man's neck. It's now a sin of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's continuing that same thing of thought.
Yes. So Jesus is actually, he's putting guilt on the heart, but he's putting guilt on actions that might lead to more serious actions. So for instance, with murder, with the anger. If you have anger, if someone has uncontrollable anger, then they could end up doing something really, really bad. If someone has uncontrollable lust, then they could end up doing something really, really bad, such as adultery. So Jesus is saying that the guilt should be placed on what the heart says, on what the mind is thinking at the time, and not necessarily what the action would be afterwards. So Jesus is really making people think before they act, for sure. Let's see. And so, going off of that, Jesus leads into the subject of divorce. And obviously, divorce is a very touchy subject. There's a lot of opinions on divorce and what can be accepted for divorce. And again, Jesus begins this one, and he says, "It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce." So, in order to be divorced, they would actually have to hand the woman an actual certificate, an actual official certificate of divorce. And basically what that did is that allowed the woman to be free to go and marry someone else that they wanted to. But what would happen if the woman did not receive a certificate, an official certificate of divorce, and went and married another man? They would be guilty of adultery, yes. And so this certificate freed them from any charges, any potential charge of adultery, of committing adultery, if they remarried. Now, back during the times of Jesus, there were many different thoughts surrounding divorce, just as there are today. And I'm not even going to try to say the names of these because I know I'm going to definitely mess up anytime I try to pronounce these. But there was one school of thought that said that a man could not divorce his wife unless he found her to be unfaithful. So that was one way of thinking. Another one said that a divorce could take place. This one's kind of funny to think about. A divorce could take place if the woman burned the man's food. What do y'all think about that? Yeah. That's an interesting thing to think about. I'm not sure exactly what to say about that. But if a woman burned the man's food, according to the school of thought, then that was grounds for divorce. And it could be accepted.
I think he must have been just looking for something to get rid of.
Probably. And actually the third one probably gets a little bit more ridiculous. And it said that a divorce could take place if the man simply found another woman that he thought was maybe better looking or he just liked. So the man could just say, hey, I saw this girl, and I think I like her a little bit better than you. So we're getting divorced. So that was another way of thinking. Now, of the three, which one would you say lines up best with what Jesus would say? Yes. So if the man found the woman to be unfaithful, then that could be grounds for divorce. And that one really does line up more with what Jesus is going to say about this. So in verse 32, Jesus says, "But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So he does say that divorce can take place. But what has to happen for that divorce to take place? Sexual immorality, unfaithfulness. Yes. Now, again, we did mention that if a man divorced his wife, and it wasn't for any reason like unfaithfulness, what happened to that woman? Would she be able to get married again? Probably not. If she did, then she would be charged, most likely, of adultery. And so there's probably two reasons that Jesus said this the way that he did. One would be that he wanted marriages to be taken seriously. He didn't want there to be this experimentation, like, okay, well, we'll get married, see how it works out. If it doesn't work out, we'll get divorced and move on. Another reason could also be that he knew the potential situation that woman could be in. So if a man just wanted to get rid of his wife for some reason, if she wasn't unfaithful, then that woman would probably be in a situation where she'd probably be fearful to marry anyone else, and most likely spend the rest of her life by herself. So imagine being put in that kind of a situation where because you married some man that didn't want to be with you, by law, you can't get married because you don't have that official certificate of divorce. You can't get married because if you do, you're going to be charged with adultery. So I feel like that's another reason that Jesus really worded this the way that he did. He wants marriages to be serious, and he wants men to really consider what they're doing when they marry a woman. You know, that's something that really has to be taken seriously. Is there anything that anybody would like to add to that part of the lesson? Anything they want to?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've never heard this connected with this teaching of Jesus. But I think everybody will remember when Mary conceived Jesus, and Joseph found out that she was with child. He was putting her away. He thought about divorcing her because she was with child, and he knew it wasn't him. But we know that Joseph was a good man, and he kept Mary, is what the Bible said. That's something that we don't often say in these cases. This is not an automatic. If a spouse is unfaithful, it's not automatic. There's room there for repentance, there's room there for forgiveness. And I've experienced this personally with someone that came to me whose wife was unfaithful, and he did not want that marriage over. He was willing to forgive her, and as far as I know, that they worked it out. They did, and that's something that often I don't hear much emphasis put on. Everybody said, okay, if your wife's unfaithful, go ahead and kick her out. Get out of here. But we don't hear too much about in these cases where we talk about forgiveness and repentance. Where, we don't want that to ever happen again.
That's a really good point. Obviously it is a very touchy subject with divorce, but there are a lot of situations, I agree, that maybe talking and working things out and showing that forgiveness and that mercy, that could go a long ways in saving a marriage. Forgiveness is a very important part of marriage, in any relationship that you have.
Our Greek teacher at Harvard mentioned that, what Jay was talking about, and he emphasized that one day in class, that even the Greek didn't say you had to put somebody away. If they were willing to repent and you're willing to forgive them. And he knew of a couple that went through that. And he said the sad thing is that the woman could never forgive herself. And what happened was one day the man went to work. When he came back home, she had killed herself.
Oh, wow.
Simply because, not because he wasn't willing to forgive and forget, she couldn't get past it herself. That is so sad.
That is.
Yeah.
That is. Wow.
It would not be easy to forgive
Mm-hmm. It wouldn't. It wouldn't. That would be one of those things that, it would be basically, you'd be stressing basically 24/7. What are they doing? They've cheated on me before, so what's to say that they won't cheat on me again? So that is a really, really tough thing to go through.
I think forgiving would be easier than forgetting. You're never going to forget that. It's hard.
Yeah. That is a really, really tough obstacle to go through in a marriage. And, you hope that people don't have to deal with that. But unfortunately, that is a thing that happens a lot. I do think that's a really good point. Just because someone does cheat on someone, you don't necessarily have to have the divorce. Forgiveness can go a really long way, but it is a very tough thing to get through, I'm sure.
You don't have to forgive me. I don't have book, chapter, and verse, but I do remember an Old Testament story where a man bought his
definitely look into that. Yeah.
Jesus talked about whenever he forgives him, he don't remember it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get that frame of mind too, that when we forgive somebody, we just don't
Mhm.
think about it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And, with these specific laws that Jesus is giving, he's giving these for a purpose, like we've already mentioned. But one of those purposes could be to try to be as much like Jesus as possible. And, with us as Christians, we do get a lot of comments that are probably not the nicest at times. I've had people come up to me before and say, well, you're a Christian, so you think that you're better than everyone else. And, the thing I can say is, I know that I'm not better than you. I know that I'm not better than anyone else. But I'm trying to be the best person that I can be. And some people have said, well, you think that you're perfect. And I know for sure I'm not perfect. I sin each and every day. I wish that I didn't sin. But I do sin. It's something that we all do. But I know I'm not perfect, but I want to make myself as perfect as I can possibly be. And so with Jesus giving these, that's what he's giving at. He knows that we can never be perfect like him. But he's laying the groundwork for working on our heart and not getting to a point where we do commit these horrible offenses, like murder, adultery, or anything like that.
I'd like to say
Mm-hmm.
In verse 32, where it says, if a man divorces his wife for any other reason except for sexual immorality, it causes her to commit adultery,
Mhm.
and she can't marry again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he can't marry again either.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they both can't marry again because it wasn't,
It wasn't an official divorce.
yeah. It's not just her that can't marry again, it's him that can't marry again either.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. That's a great point. So it's not just the woman that can't get married. It's the man. Because if the man gets married again, then he can also be charged with adultery. Yes, that's a great point. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add to divorce? Yes, ma'am.
Forgiveness is a lot easier than splitting the family.
Mm-hmm.
Because look at all the things you have to go through with if you split the family, especially if there are children.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that happen in my own family. It's not pretty.
No.
It's not easy. Forgiveness is a word that will keep the family together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once you don't forgive, I mean, it's everything. You have all this, you can have all this.
Mm-hmm.
You can have this child involved, you can have this child involved. God didn't intend for that to happen to families.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's a very serious thing. It is. There's a lot of sad things that can come out of that. And like Jay mentioned, forgiveness is a really important part of that. I agree. Well, the next thing that Jesus mentions is regarding oaths or vows. So whenever you make a promise, what are we expected to do? We're expected to keep it, yes. And so this part again begins, again you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. So do not break your oath. When you say something, that means that you're going to do it. And in the days of Christ, it's kind of weird how this would work. But it was almost as if one's promise wasn't necessarily as important as the way that they formed the promise. So, for example, a person might swear by the temple, and if he did not fulfill the promise, it wasn't really a big deal, because he swore just by the temple. Now, if the man had said that he swore by the gold in the temple, and he didn't fulfill his promise, then he could have an issue. So, it's kind of weird, the way that they would form the promise. In one way, if they said it one way, And if they didn't fulfill the promise, then it's not a big deal. But if they said it another way, then it could be a big deal. So this is where it leads us up to swearing in general, swearing by anything. And so Jesus says, "But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king." So Jesus comes in and he says, you should not do what? You shouldn't swear an oath at all, because as Christ's people, as Christians, we are expected, when we say any kind of a promise, when we have any kind of an oath, we are expected to fulfill it. So it doesn't matter if we swear by the temple or by the temple of gold or whatever. We are expected to fulfill a promise that we make, no matter what. So Jesus is saying there is no point in swearing on anything. And is there anything that anybody would like to add to that?
Took the loopholes out of it.
He did.
That's what those different wordages were, loopholes.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you used horse brothers.
Yeah, so very technical. And again, people today are still technical. There's laws that exist today in this country, and people can get around them. But they can still say that they technically obeyed the law when there was a little bit of twisting there.
As an old person, one of the greatest things that somebody could say about me,
Mhm.
or you, any of us, is that you can believe what they tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Their yea is yea and their nay is nay. And that is our reputation.
Mm-hmm.
That is our reputation in the community wherever we go.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not much better than that.
Mm-hmm.
That we have kept our promises. We have, our yea was yea and our nay was nay. And that has given us that good
Mm-hmm.
reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna help us when we talk to people about the Bible or whatever it is we're doing.
Mm-hmm. It will.
It's a wonderful thing to have a good reputation because we have kept our word.
It is, yes. A reputation can go a long way. A good reputation. Again, a bad reputation can really deter us from helping anybody because they're not going to trust in us. So
It'll follow you everywhere you go.
it will. It will.
Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, don't make a vow to God and not keep it.
Mm-hmm.
Better not to make the vow to God
Mm-hmm.
than make one and then not keep it.
Yes, sir.
Don't lie to God. You're not gonna get away with it.
No, sir. No, sir. And actually, going along with the twisting that would take place, someone that I know actually had a woman approach him once. And it was a Jewish woman. And she said, basically, I live off of the law of Moses. I don't necessarily agree with what Jesus is saying here. So she went off of specifically what the law of Moses said and the way that certain people would interpret those laws. And so there might be certain things that she did that to people like her, they were accepted and it was appropriate. And so she said basically that because she did what the law said, according to their interpretation, because she did what the law said, she didn't necessarily have any sin. And because she didn't have any sin, she didn't have any need for someone to sacrifice his life for the forgiveness of those sins. So, there's still people out there that believe in that. And, we, as Christians, as difficult as it is, we're told to teach on things like this. And, it can be really difficult. So what are some ways that y'all would go about helping someone, maybe whether, if it's divorce, if it's maybe not keeping promises, adultery, how do you approach that? How do you do that in a way that's not going to have someone blow up on you? Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. We all have sinned. None of us is clean. We're all sinful. We sin each and every day, like I mentioned. So that would be a good way to go about it.
Well, first of all, if they don't believe the Word of God is the Word of God, you're not going to get anywhere with them in the first place. And if they do believe the Word of God is the Word of God, then you go to the Word of God and you show them what Jesus said. And there's no getting around it.
That's
You
true.
do what he says or else. And you say it in the nicest way possible.
John, Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 says, if anyone's taken over in a trespass, the person that's spiritual, restore that one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, like Melvin said, lest you also bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. So, but you want a guide on how to approach someone that's having a problem, that's a pretty good guide.
Yeah, it is. Does anyone maybe have any experience where maybe someone got a little upset when you were trying to help them? I'm sure there's been quite a few. But again, it's tough. There's a lot of touchy subjects out there, and some people will take the time to think on things before they blow up, and some people will just react, out of rage. And so I think back to the story of me and my drawing, and I know today, again, that the teacher was correct, that there were some things that I definitely could have worked on, but that's not what I wanted to hear at the time. And so, we as Christians, we're tasked with a pretty big job of trying to help others, but trying to do it in a way that encourages them and draws them near to God.
Moses allowed him to do that. From the beginning, Moses allowed man. Not people doing that today. They're allowing things to happen. Book doesn't teach. Just like you talk about the lady, you don't believe she needs to look right. You come up real quick, you go these days. She's not covered by that fluid, because that's the only thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now there's only one judge.
There is.
People are not judges.
Yes, ma'am.
Even if someone reacts badly, that doesn't mean they're not gonna think about it later. You may not have wasted your time.
That's a good point. So, someone might show some anger, but they probably are going to think about it. And, if you've at least made someone think about it, then you've made a little bit of progress.
While I was preaching here, an area preacher got into some terrible things. And we loved him, loved the family. They called me, and I took my wife and 3 girls over to their house, and all I could do was read scripture to them. I didn't give my opinion. Pretty much like it.
Yeah, the Bible is definitely the best guide for that.
That's right.
It is. It is.
Didn't give my opinion.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the class. And next week, I'm not sure if it'll be me or Tim, but we will continue on with the Beatitudes. So, thank you very much.
right, good evening, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. Our announcements, for the most part, are the same as from Sunday. Don't forget our VBS coming up. That being said, this coming Sunday and the following Wednesday, we will not have regular evening service. We're going to do VBS. And after the kids leave out Sunday night, we will probably sing a few songs and offer the Lord's Supper and then go to work. Clear enough? All right. Don't forget Harley's wedding shower on the 12th. I guess that's this Sunday as well. Pantry items continue to be juice. We do have a thank you card from the Elmore family, and I posted that in the back. Remember the Sarton family with the passing of Monica, the McMillan family with the passing of Stephen. I think I mentioned Sunday that my buddy Kevin, his mass did turn out to be cancer, and they're going to do some radiation and deal with that accordingly. Devo list, we got Clay up tonight, followed by Skylar, Mark, and Stephen. On our birthdays, looks like, this is the 8th, right? Yep. Looks like tomorrow is Kennedy and Halen's birthday, and the 11th is Lindsay's birthday, and the 10th, Bernie and Loretta have an anniversary. Melford, you tell me you want to dismiss us tonight? Yes, sir. Melford will dismiss us at the appropriate time. Clay, she's all yours.
Good evening. Wouldn't it be great to have everlasting life in heaven with God and Jesus? And would you please turn to John 3:16? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And would you please turn to John chapter 10, verse 28 through 30? And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. How to get everlasting life? Would you please turn to John? Or how to get everlasting life was which I read just a while ago, was for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And so if you don't know, everlasting life is sorry. And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I am the Father. I and my Father are one. And why is it important to have everlasting life in heaven? Will you please turn to Romans chapter 3, verse 23? Romans chapter 3, verse 23. What advantage, for all have sinned and fall short of glory of God. And in conclusion, God has given us instructions on how to gain everlasting life with Him. If you need to respond, please come as we stand and sing.
Number 643. 643. I heard an old story, how the Savior came from glory, how He gave His life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about His groaning, of His precious blood's atoning. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is to Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion He has built for me in glory, and I heard about the street of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing, and the old redemption story. And some sweet day I'll sing up there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is to Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. Well, good job. VBS after church Sunday.
That's for us when it started.
Absolutely. We'll see
Not
everybody.
after church. Started at 6 o'clock.
Evening service.
Yes, sir.
I said after church. I meant evening service.
Yes, sir.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
That's what I meant. Evening service. VBS. All right, we'll have Jesus loves me, and we'll be dismissed from prayer. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Him belong. They are weak, but He is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
Lord, we're thankful for this opportunity to come together and worship you, Lord, and study your word. We're thankful to live in a country where we have freedom to worship you without fear
and especially with all those that serve in these pastors here, blessed with their abilities. This church can strengthen the kingdom over here. This can strengthen this community. So please be with those that have lost loved ones and those that are battling